Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Ward, and I teach about long distance real estate investing. Let me start off about just introducing a little bit about myself. So, I would not say I'm an uber experienced investor by any means. I started investing or more heavily focused on investing, I should say, about 3 years ago when and before that, my husband and we moved to Denver about 7 years ago, and we did a live-in flip. And we thought at that time, oh, we're going to just start flipping houses. Well, not long after we moved into our live-in flip and nearing the finish line, I started looking for my next project, and I realized what a hot competitive market Denver was and still is today. And so from that point, we decided to rent out our house, our flip, and we moved into a new house that we also did some rehab to. So we were kind of following that path of doing the live and flip and building up investment properties that way. But we only ended up doing the two. And eventually I went back to work to just a regular full-time job. And eventually I was introduced to the concept of financial independence, or the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And I got very excited about this movement, started just diving into all information. And that's kind of when my husband and I made the call that, we want to do everything we can to be able to retire early and just live a full life as a family, doing traveling, which we love, and just finding new adventures. And this was before we had our kid, who's about to be 2, like I mentioned. And so when we decided we wanted to try to find the path to retire early, real estate was going to be our vehicle to do that. We wanted to acquire as many rental properties as we could, so we could then live off our rental income and not have to worry about having a W-2 job to support ourselves. So with that in mind, I then learned about BiggerPockets, which I'm sure a lot of you know about already. And that's when I learned about David Greene and his book about long distance real estate investing. And, before that, I was just really banging my head, wondering how we're going to acquire rental properties in this hot Denver market. The average price at that time, so when we made this shift was 3 years ago, that we were going to go heavy into real estate, even though we've dabbled already some, but we wanted to really make it our path to retire. And we were looking at the market to try to find more rental properties, and houses, started in the 300s, and these weren't move-in ready houses either. So it was going to take additional money to get it livable. And I worked in higher education at the time, so I didn't have a high income, because that's just how it goes with education. And then, my husband, he was making more money than me, but to combine, we weren't making enough to really make it work in Denver. We would have to save years and years from the next down payment. So that got discouraging. But when I discovered about David Greene's book on long distance real estate investing, a light bulb just immediately went off. I was like, of course, we don't have to be tied to Denver to start our real estate investing portfolio. We can look outside. We can stay in Denver. We don't have to move. We love Denver. We love Colorado. We love the outdoors. But we can finally look into another market that does make sense for us, that does allow us to build our portfolio faster within our means. So I got really pumped up about it, read the book, and then after reading the book, I did a whole market analysis of several different cities. And then that's when I decided to put the pin in Indianapolis, where I invest. So I'll go through my process, like I mentioned a little bit ago, on how I chose Indianapolis. And then how I came to be kind of here teaching with REI USA is at the beginning of the decision of wanting to invest long distance, I was eager to learn outside of just reading the book, and I wanted to network with other like-minded investors. And so I went on meetup.com, and I found that there was a long distance investing group that meets in Denver. So I joined, but unfortunately, nothing was going on. There was no meetings. And then one day, Meetup sent a message out to all the members saying that the leader of the group, I guess, stepped down. So if anybody wanted to take over, they could. And, I thought, well, I'm not the expert here, but I could probably find people who know more about it than me and have them share with the group. So I raised my hand and volunteered to be the leader of the group, just solely to bring in the experts or people with more experience in investing in other markets. And so that's kind of how I got into this role of talking about being a spokesperson for long distance real estate investing. And then when COVID hit, I switched the group. I still do have it hosted on Meetup, but I also switched it to Facebook. So now it's opened up to anybody in the world to join our community of long distance real estate investors to network and learn about other markets. And so that's what my segue to mention that with REI USA, I signed up to teach every second Tuesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And so I try to bring on a fellow long distance real estate investor investing for a few years at least in another market. And many times I ask them if they can bring on a team member of theirs. And so I might have the investor and their realtor on with me, sharing about their particular market and the pros and cons, how they got started there, why they chose that market, and kind of try to give us some insider information on the area and where are good neighborhoods, where are the bad neighborhoods, and just all the nuances that you want to be aware of when investing. So I hope you come back and join me on the second Tuesday of the month at 8 p.m. to learn about another market. I like to call them market spotlights. So, all righty. So now I'm going to get into the meat of the presentation. So why long distance? So I kind of talked about my personal goal of reaching financial independence and living on our rental properties as our main source of income. So with that, cash flow is super important for me and my personal goals and my family's personal goals. So I got into long distance investing to find markets that I can cash flow. You might have heard in the real estate community, you want to try to make 1 to 2%. So that's like a very basic benchmark. There's other formulas you want to use as well to make sure it's a worthwhile investment. But, just to make it easy for the sake of this presentation, I focused on finding markets that I would make at minimum 1% of the home value in rent. So, for example, if you haven't heard about this rule before, if you buy a home for $100,000, you want to be able to bring in at least $1,000 in rent. Okay, that's not cash flow, that's just rent. And so that was part of one of my variables when looking into other markets. How much rent compared to home value or purchase price of properties can I get? Another reason why long distance investing was so attractive to me was for freedom. We did, like I mentioned at the very beginning, we did end up having a rental property. We turned our live-in flip into a rental, and then we moved into a new primary house. And we managed the rental ourselves. So that means we were taking all the calls from the tenant about any issues coming up. And we were using our time, our free time when we weren't at our W-2 jobs to go and take care of the property for the tenant to make sure everything is going smoothly. And that's not how we want to spend our time. And I knew that if I wanted to have more freedom in my life, to have use my precious free time to go explore Colorado, go travel, I'm going to need to have a team to help support me. And so when investing long distance, it forces you to find that team. It forces you to rely on others, whether you like it or not. I would say I'm a control freak. So this might be against, every natural fiber in my body. But I just knew that this was something I had to change into, to adjust to, in order to have that freedom. So you might want to think about that as well in your real estate investing goals is, why are you investing? Why are you getting in real estate? And I imagine for most of you, it is to have some freedom. And to do that, you want to have a team, because real estate investing, as though some people like to talk about it as being a passive source of income, it's really not that passive. But if you get a team in place, you can make it more passive. So, and there's also obviously other real estate investing vehicles that might be more passive than others, but I'm regarding to, single family home rental properties. So it still requires some work. So once I made the call to start investing long distance, I started just doing some research. At the time, the main source I had or that I knew about to use was BiggerPockets. Today, I use BiggerPockets. I use a variety of Facebook groups that I've found. And then now we have REI USA. So that's awesome as well. Another resource at your hands. But I just went on and did look through the forums and sent out questions about where people like to invest, where do they find that they have the best, what kind of cash flow are they getting in their different markets. And so then I just kind of started putting pins in different places that I heard about along the way, just seeing what places were mentioned frequently. Okay. So once I got a list of cities together, I then had to figure out a way to compare each city, all right, compare them to each other. And that's when I got into finding my important variables, okay? So these are all the variables that I had listed out and I made a chart. So rent to value, I've mentioned already, that kind of goes into the 1 to 2% rule. So I wanted to make sure that that market was getting at least a minimum of 1% of rent compared to the average home value. Other factors you might want to consider that, will take away from your cash flow are insurance to home value. So how much insurance are you paying compared to the home value? Some states might have higher insurance premiums, such as the coastal regions that deal with hurricanes, or maybe the Tornado Alley area, what have you. So those are just, some factors. I mean, in all honesty, the insurance premiums really don't fluctuate a whole lot from state to state to make a huge impact in your cash flow. But at the time, that was something I was thinking about. Also, taxes to value. So I think this is an important one to really dive into. And I've learned more about taxes after investing in Indianapolis. So, what I was looking at when I was initially comparing finding my data for how much taxes an area pays is generally, when you find this data, they're giving you the taxes of a homestead. So someone who lives in the property that they own, and the taxes that they pay for that. So you want to really dive into taxes more when you're starting to really compare different cities and find out what is the actual tax rate for that city for investment properties. Because if I had known better at the time, which, it's all a learning process, I probably wouldn't have chose Indianapolis, because in Indianapolis, you pay 2% if it's an investment property. Whereas if it's your homestead, you just pay 1%. So I was just seeing that 1% initially, and I thought that was a better tax rate than some of the other markets I was comparing it to. Also, another variable I looked into was rent to income. So I wanted to make sure it was an affordable area for tenants, that they're going to be able to pay their rent each month. And I wasn't going to have to be too concerned if it was going to be a stretch for them to be able to afford their rent. So that was another important factor to me. And I learned somewhere along the way that I forget what podcast it was one of the Bigger Pockets podcast. I forget like which episode it was, but they were interviewing somebody who dealt more with a large multifamily, apartment building type properties. And his sweet spot was, having rents between $700 and $1,000. And he was experienced enough to ride through that, the housing crisis, and he was able to, his tenants were still able to pay rent each month because his rent wasn't super high, like $2,000 a month, like you see here in Denver. And you wonder, is that sustainable? So that was another factor for me. I just wanted to make sure it was affordable. So generally, the general rule of thumb is you want the tenant to make 3 times the rent. So, that's you can compare that to the income and the average rent in order to figure out if the market there is affordable enough to where people are making 3 times the average rent. Another important factor is population growth. So you want to make sure people are continuing to, the city or the market is continuously attracting people, and people are wanting to stay and are also moving there rather than moving out. Another factor is appreciation. I don't put a whole lot of weight on this variable, but I just kind of see it as the icing on the cake. So Indianapolis, when I was comparing it, it kind of had a flat line with appreciation. It would go up a little bit, but nothing dramatic. Denver has been all about appreciation the last 10 years, but it's been a while that we've had this very healthy growth of appreciation, but you always have to question, is that going to taper off? And how long is that going to be sustainable? So, yes, I want my properties to appreciate, but as long as they're not depreciating is the main point there. I don't want them to devalue. Other factors are unemployment. So, that ties in a little bit with the rent to income. I want to make sure that there's a low unemployment rate compared to other cities. That there's a healthy job industry, enough diversification of jobs, so that way, the market isn't dependent on one industry, and that there's a diversity and healthy and low unemployment rate. And then finally, crime. I do want to see that it's a relatively safe area. Of course, you're always going to have your pockets in every market of higher crime areas, but there are cities that are known to have significantly higher crime than other cities. So I prefer to be in the lower crime cities overall. So, especially when you're dealing with long distance. Okay, so those were some of my foundational variables when comparing different cities. And I'll get to my chart that you'll see that I made when doing this. But other things that you want to think about once you kind of have an idea of how the cities compare to each other, you then can dive a little bit deeper into these variables. So property management fees, that's just going to impact your cash flow. And you will want a property manager, especially if you're doing this the first time. I am actually now starting to self-manage some properties, but I feel comfortable doing that from a distance because I've been in the market for several years now. I've developed a whole variety of contacts and people I trust. And so I feel comfortable taking on the challenge of managing them myself. And I'm also going through Section 8 right now. So that's another reason why I feel like I'm not reliant on having a property manager. But the very beginning, property managers are so valuable. They will introduce you to all of your other team members as well. They will let you know what areas are good, what areas to shy away from. They'll let you know what is the norm as far as like the features of properties, what are the most marketable properties to tenants, what of course, the going rent rate is. So definitely use a property manager, at least for your first few properties, your first time investing into a new market. They are extremely valuable, especially at the beginning. But with that, they have a fee, and that's in some markets, the fee is average 8%. Some markets it's 10 to 12%. So, 8 to 12%, it's not going to be a huge difference with your cash flow, but it's just, something to consider. I mentioned earlier about when talking about unemployment, having a diversification of different industries. So that's something you want to look into as well. Is it like back in the day when Detroit was all about the auto industry? You don't want to find yourself in a situation like that. So I think a lot of cities today have a pretty good diversity of industries. So it's not going to be too challenging to find one, but just make sure you double check that. Rental property expectations. So this one kind of came about, I added this later on after networking with even more long distance investors through my group and learning about other markets when interviewing them. But so I'm referring to this as far as like what kind of finishes or services you should provide within the property. Believe it or not, in Oklahoma, in Oklahoma City, you don't have to provide appliances. You don't have to provide a refrigerator or stove. It's quite common for the tenants to provide those, which, you could kind of ask if you want to, have that extra, you could be seen as an extra benefit in that area. But once you start having a rental property for a few years, those appliances, eventually will go out of commission and you will have to replace them. They are at least $500, for one appliance, and that can take away your cash flow for several months. So going into a market where that's not expected, that could be a big advantage, Another factor that is really important are the tenant and landlord laws. So as a real estate investor, it's in your best interest to look into the markets that are more landlord friendly. And that, won't take, months and months if a tenant defaults on their rent and isn't following through with the contract that was put in place, that it won't take months and months to evict them. That it is favorable to the landlord to just, provide notice and then within, a week or so afterwards, start the proceedings for eviction. Because if you have a tenant living there, essentially rent-free for months and months, that wipes out all your cash flow, obviously. And it's going to take even longer to start generating rent, because once you get them out, then you have to do the whole turnover process. So if they're in there for 2 months rent-free, account for another month, maybe 2 months to get a new tenant in place. So it's just something you want to consider for sure. And then finally, multiple service providers. So what I mean by that is when we're talking about your team that you want to build in a market that's long distance to you, you want to be able to have several different options of each team member role. So when I talked about the property manager and finding one of those, I would encourage you to invest in a city or a market that has several different property management companies. They are a crucial team member. But with that being said, I've had 3 different property management companies so far. It's hard to find one where they run and operate the business and how you would like to run your property. And also sometimes you'll notice that property management companies also have real estate brokerages tied with them. So I like to make sure personally that the property management company doesn't focus a lot of their business on the real estate brokerage, finding, buying and selling houses for people, but it's more focused on the property management side of things. So it takes a while to kind of establish that and find one that's a perfect team member for you. And then also contractors. So, generally your property manager will have the contacts with the contractor, but down the road, you may want to handle like any maintenance requests, calling out different contractors on your own. And so you want to make sure that it's a market that there's plenty of contractors to call on. And real estate, there's a lot of realtors everywhere, so you shouldn't have a problem no matter what market you're in finding a realtor. But there's also other things such as home inspectors. So when you're in the process of buying a new property, having different home inspectors to choose from. So it can go on and on of the different team members that you want to have multiple options to reach of different people in each role to reach out to. Okay, so when I started my analysis, these were some of the websites I went to at the time to find some of my data. So there's valuepenguin.com I use to find the average insurance premiums. Today, I would probably go to my insurance broker to ask him. I use Goosehead Insurance, and they are nationwide. And I feel like they'll give me obviously the most accurate information. If I say, okay, I'm going to probably look for a property in this city, I'm interested in this new city, and I'll probably buy like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath property. What's the average premiums you're finding in that city? So that's when you're going to get your more accurate data. But if you just want to do, a bird's eye view of the different insurance premiums, Value Penguin can do that for you. World Population Review can give you some data on the population there and if it's growing or declining over the years. CityData.com gives you a wealth of information. Both with CityData.com and NeighborhoodScout.com, they provide similar information. Neighborhood Scout might go a little bit deeper in some different data points. And also, these are fee-based websites. So they'll give you some information free, just from going to their website, some basic information. But if you want some more detailed, then you'll want to pay into their service. However, I did not, and I got my general information from the free info that they provide, and that helped me enough to at least start putting the pin somewhere. So you won't have to pay for it initially, but depending if you want to really, how much deeper you want to dive into a particular market, it may be worth paying for their service. And then Bigger Pockets, like I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of my journey, is what I use to find anecdotal information from other investors by reading through the forums and whatnot. All right, so here's the chart I put together when I was comparing the cities. So I compared Atlanta, Cleveland, Memphis, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, and Albuquerque. All but Albuquerque I had on there because those were just the cities I would hear about more often than others through the different forums and networking. I put Albuquerque on there because it's not far from Denver, and a lot of people in our city invest there. So I was just curious more than anything how it compared to these more popular places that people invested. So then I just started, finding the variables like the average rent for these cities, the average home value, the average income, the average taxes. And then I just kind of divided it. So, if the average home value was like Cleveland, let's say was 100,000, and the rent was 1,000. So I just divided 1,000 divided by 100,000, and then I times it by 100 to give me my percentage point. So that's how I did all of my data points. As you see here, unemployment is just whatever I found on the city data or neighborhood scout. Same with crime. And then the population growth, I just pulled straight from that website I mentioned. So that's how, as well as average annual appreciation. So that is what I did to compare. And as you see, and you have to decide, which variables are most important to you. Indianapolis, you'll notice, wasn't the best out of any of the variables, nor was it the worst. It kind of ranked, the top 2, 3, and it was just consistent all the way through. So, Cleveland had the best rent to value. However, if you notice taxes to value, it was the worst. So that's why I crossed off Cleveland. Again, with taxes, you really have to dive deeper though, because then later I learned, there are neighborhoods around Cleveland that have a much better tax rate. It was particular neighborhoods that was kind of offsetting the average tax rate. Anything that ends with Heights in Cleveland just had an extremely high tax rate. And let's see some other, so rent to income, so lower is better. So Albuquerque, was the most affordable place, but Cleveland was the least affordable. So, but anyways, I think you're kind of getting my points on just, once you get all your variables together, deciding which ones are the most variables are most important to you. And then whichever city panned out the best as far as data, then that's what I would take to investigate more and start networking and finding more information about that city. All right, so now I'm just going to share a little bit about the market I chose. So I chose Indianapolis. And now I'm going to go into how I found my team. So I need to update this slide because obviously I would add REI USA on here. But initially I decided I needed to take a trip to Indianapolis to meet with anybody who I think could be a good potential team member. And so I decided to go on a trip to Indianapolis around the time that there was as many, regular meetings happening as possible. So now you could, probably go on REI USA and attend one of the state meetings, so you could attend, once Indiana is in the picture, attend a state meeting for Indiana, for example, and get information that way. But I went online to meetup.com, or I just Googled REIA for that particular city. So REIAs are real estate investor associations. So usually big cities might have more than one. So I just tried to figure out what the REIAs were. And then I went on to their websites and looked at their calendar to see when they were having their regular meetings. You can also go on Facebook to see if there's any local groups for real estate investing and if they meet virtually or physically. And so this was all pre-pandemic. So you might try to do this just networking from home rather than taking a trip, even though it seems, I hope we're getting past the pandemic. It seems so. But I found that there was a week in the month that had the majority of meetings. So that's when I decided to go to Indianapolis, to go to any of those regular meetings. Then I also chose to, rather than getting a hotel room, I went on Airbnb and found a place to stay that wasn't its own house, but I had my own room within a house that the host lived in. I did that because I wanted to be able to talk to the host if they were around and willing, and ask them questions about the city. Since they live there, they would be a really good source to just kind of learn about the city and what areas they like, what areas that they don't go to, anything that is developing in the city, locals will generally know about, just, either through friends or watching the news, what have you. So I decided to, book a place through Airbnb where the host lives on site. I haven't done this, but I plan on it next time I go to Indianapolis. But take a tour, do something fun. Doesn't have to be all business. So a lot of cities will have different tours that you can do, and that's another way to learn about the city. And you could also kind of do your 20 questions with the tour guide, who will probably know endless information. And then around the RIA meetings that were happening, I went ahead and networked before I got there with different realtors, property managers. I was able to find a contractor who was able to meet with me without having a property lined up, and then other investors. So I reached out, I networked, online with all these different people, and arranged meetings to meet them in person when I was in Indianapolis around the RIA meetings that were happening. So my schedule is packed full. I mean, I was there, my first trip, I was there for 3 full days, and I was just back to back meetings, either with one-on-ones or going to group RIA meetings. All right, so I kind of talked a little bit already about building your team. Property managers are number one. They'll generally be a realtor themselves, or have a brokerage, like I mentioned, or they'll have contacts with realtors. They'll also should have contacts with different contractors. And then you can also decide if you want to meet with some turnkey companies. So there's some pros and cons with turnkey companies. What turnkey companies do is they're offering you an investment property that is move-in ready and technically with a tenant in place. So once you buy it, you'll be making income right away. Some disadvantages with that is there's a tenant in place. But if you get some information from the turnkey company on how they vet the tenants, then that can maybe make you feel more comfortable buying the property with a tenant in place. And generally, since that's kind of like their product is offering you an investment property that's ready to go, making money right away, it's their reputation to make sure that they've placed a tenant that is credible and reliable and will pay their rent on time. So some people like to pursue that famous BRRRR strategy. So buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So if you have, I'm sure we all have a finite amount of funds that we can use to invest in. So that's a method that you can use to try to recycle your funds as much as possible to acquire additional properties. So if that's your strategy, then turnkey won't be for you. All right. Other team members will be inspectors. So generally, once you find your realtor, they're going to know several inspectors. They'll also know lenders. Realtors and will know a variety of different lenders. And then insurance companies. So again, your property manager, your realtor will probably have suggestions on different insurance individuals insurance carriers you can contact, as well as title companies. So these all need to be part of your team. And believe it or not, like title companies, I contacted several different ones in Indianapolis, asked for their fee sheets, because they all do charge different processing fees. And I picked one that had the best rates. And they, by chance, really cater to investors, and they can also help you with other just other research that you're trying to do on properties. I mean, your realtor, of course, can help you out a lot with that, but title companies have a wealth of information as well. And if you start building a relationship, they'll be happy to provide you, information that on a particular property before putting an offer in. So, okay, so here is my first property that I bought in Indianapolis. I decided to buy in the west side of Indianapolis as my first one because I saw that the west side had even better rent rates than the east side of Indianapolis. And it also had better school areas. Yeah, and the crime also was a little less than the east side. You know, the east had more pockets of higher crime than the west side did. So I focused on the west side of Indianapolis, and I learned all of that just by, networking with all the different team members that I was trying to develop relationships with, and then also just going on the different data websites that I've mentioned. So 3 years ago, we bought our first property, and we bought it for 44,000 basically. And I really had to step back and take the lead of my realtor, and what they suggested far as putting an offer price in, because I was kind of coming from the market in Denver. In Denver, you always have to submit an offer over asking if you even want the seller to consider your offer almost. It's been this way for the last 10 years. It's just kind of crazy, but that's how it is. And so I was anticipating, I think the house was listed for 55,000. And I was like, okay, so do we offer 60,000? What do you think is the best offer? He's like, no, I would offer 50,000 if anything. And so if it was just me going in there, I would have offered way too much money just because I was used to my market where I live. So that's, again, why you really got to trust and rely on your team. They're going to know what's in the best interest. And so under asking was appropriate and common in this market. Today, it's not as easy like anywhere else right now. Indianapolis, it's definitely a market now where you're offering probably asking price at the minimum. It's less common to offer less than asking today, I would say. So it's a lot harder than it was 3 years ago. So then, we got under contract around 50,000, and then I had my inspection, and then we had it reduced after the inspection down to 44,000. Rehab costs. So I was trying to do the BRRRR method at the time. So I put in rehab cost of about $20,000. I was able to rent it for $1,050. And when I got the appraisal in, it was $75,000. And I got a loan on it. I financed it at $56,000. So I left some money in it. Generally with BRRRR, you want to try to get all of it out, but $8,000 left in it is much better than leaving $64,000 in it. So I was very happy with that. Okay, well, that is the meat of the presentation. I'd love to connect with you. You can find me again on REI USA every second Tuesday of the month at 8 p.m. I also have my Facebook group, as I mentioned at the beginning. It's Long Distance Real Estate Investors. So you can find me there and connect with other long distance investors. Oops, sorry. And then if you want to connect with me one-on-one, here's my email is at the bottom, jennifer@reimamas.com. I'm starting a blog called reimamas.com. And I haven't done a whole lot yet on the social media with it, but you could find me that way and send me a message if you like. So with that, thanks so much. Are there any questions I can help answer?
Yes, we do have a couple questions. And if you have questions for Jennifer, go ahead and put them in the chat, okay, so that we can go over them. Especially, she's, like I said, Jennifer's very good at showing everybody how to find the right market. I was going to ask you too, okay, one of the questions we have is, how are you sourcing your data? And that was for the very first slide when you were going through all of the things to look at for the market. Like, which websites are you using?
Yeah, I guess so that I'm sure they might have asked that question before I showed this slide. So so these were the websites. So I would really focus on in general, I think to start out, just go to citydata.com and neighborhoodscout.com. I haven't done a market analysis in a long time, so I'm sure that both of these sites are really beefed up. I would say though that Neighborhood Scout is more popular among other investors.
And for each of those websites, what can you find? So what's Neighborhood Scout versus Value Penguin?
Well, Value Penguin is just for insurance
Oh, that's
premiums.
right. Okay.
Average insurance premiums. But City Data, Neighborhood Scout, you can find most of all information except for specifics like insurance, I would say. But they give, they can also provide population, but they'll provide average home value, average rent, average income. They'll show you a crime index. Let's see, they'll talk about a little bit about the different industries as well. So yeah, just a whole lot of information about just all the different data points you would think a city would have. So
okay, perfect. Now, let's see. Mark asks, are you buying your properties more creatively, like sub-2 owner finance? Are you buying with others cash or yours? How are you buying your properties?
No, well, only recently am I trying to get more creative about finding properties, not necessarily about how I'm buying them. I just, this last year, I've built a lead generating website, housebuyingmamas.com. And actually this last week, after 6 months of working on it, I did switch my market from Indianapolis to Terre Haute, which is still in Indiana, but it's about an hour away. And after I did that, it being a smaller market, I got my first lead and we're already under contract. So I'm now using this lead generating website to help me find properties. But yeah, I only bought properties, either financing or with cash. So
and what Jennifer is talking about is Carrot, right? We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
You weren't on yesterday, but the very first session I did, we talked about all the different ways of finding properties, free, online, and direct mail marketing. And what Jennifer's done now is move to online marketing, and she's using that site I talked about, Carrot, and the back office and all that stuff. You want to just go into that for a minute, maybe just tell everybody about it.
Yeah, so I do use carrot.com to host my website. I did buy into like an educational program that teaches you how to do it yourself about SEO and building a credible website. And that's how I got to use Carrot, because they use Carrot themselves for their own website. So Carrot specifically focuses on websites that are for lead generating, real estate lead generating, and now also for realtors to find new clients. And so, yeah, they have a lot of tools already there for you. They have all these templates. But what I've learned through this educational program that I bought into to help me build the website and learn how the process works is, you really have to do what you can to distinguish yourself and make a brand for yourself. So don't just take the template on Carrot and just put your name on it. You really want to change things up, add your own photos. There's a lot to it. In hindsight, I probably would have just hired somebody to build it. Because it's a lot of work. And yeah, it's just a whole other industry. And there's
but even after you build it, you still have to get the lead gen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just it's definitely something that you have to invest a lot of time and money into, to be honest. But
you got one lead and you got it under contract.
Yes. Yeah. So, I feel confident it will pay off. I'm in the position now where real estate is in addition to be a stay-at-home mom, but real estate is my full-time job, and so going the lead generating website route, I think is a good fit for me right now in this stage of my real estate investing career. If I was still working a full-time job, If I had the money to hire people to manage it, yeah, then I would do that. But if I didn't have that extra money to hire people to manage it and still invest in real estate, then I probably won't go the website route yet. So there are tools out there, but there's some tools you have to be ready for and be able to put that time and effort in.
Now, to
I-
buy all your properties, are you just borrowing money from the bank, or how are you buying all your stuff, all your properties?
I do have a private lender, and before, like when we bought most of our properties, right now we have 5 doors in Indianapolis. So one of them is a duplex. So technically 4 properties making 5 doors. And we bought all of those when I was still working my W-2 job and my husband as well. And we actually did a 1031 exchange to get most of them, because we did, I didn't mention this, but we did have a condo that we bought in Denver, because that's what we could afford in Denver was only a condo. We couldn't afford a single family or a multifamily home. And so when we decided to sell it, because we were just having nightmare issues with the HOA, we did a 1031, and to do an even exchange, we had to buy 3 properties in Indianapolis for the amount our one condo was in Denver. So that just kind of tells you the drastic value difference of real estate between the 2 cities. And so I was able to get a loan, a traditional loan on all of them, but I had to close on the same day. It was very stressful. So that's how I got our rental properties. I have a flip going on right now in Indianapolis, and I did buy that with private money. And then this contract that I have in place through my from the deal I got from my lead generating website. I am using my own cash for that I've had saved up.
Awesome. Cool. Good. Okay, good. Anything else? Any final tips or anything like that you want to give? You want to give everybody before we move on to the next session? I appreciate you coming and hanging out with us.
Yeah. Oh, always happy to share. I mean, I just, the biggest tip I can say is just get started. And I'm sure you've heard this already a number of times, but you always hear about analysis paralysis. And don't go in it with the expectation that you're going to make money off your first deal. I feel like I got lucky with my first property, but it takes a while, in my opinion, it takes experience, I should say, to really start becoming profitable in real estate investing. And so as long as, you don't lose money, that's the goal at the beginning, in my opinion. So don't go in it with these high expectations that you're going to make all this money right away. Just get started, and then once you get started, people start taking you more seriously. You start receiving more information from other realtors, maybe property managers as well, because they sell, they're selling their clients' properties from time to time. So eventually it will start building up, but it all takes to just get started. And give yourself grace, and don't put this high bar at the very beginning. Just getting your foot in the door is key, in my opinion. And, today I didn't start out using a coach, but after, I feel like I probably would be further along in my real estate with my real estate portfolio if I had hired a coach at the beginning. So I would consider that as well. So.
Awesome. I love it. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us, especially on a Sunday, but yeah, thanks for coming and teaching with us. We appreciate
thanks for
everything
putting
that
all
you
of
do.
this on and putting REI USA together. So I think it's a great community. All the teachers, are awesome. I really enjoy learning from them. So it's, I think I wish I had something like REI USA when I first started investing long distance, because it would have just made life a whole lot easier to be able to virtually connect and attend and network, online without having to travel. I still think you should travel to whatever city you're going to go to or invest in, because that way the people will take you even more seriously when you're there present, when you physically meet them. But this is a great way to at least, dabble and figure it out and what's going to be the best method